Why don't I have any volume? Give me 1 second. Sorry, guys. That should have made a noise and it didn't. So there we go. That's why. Okay. So what we are going to talk about today is pretty basic, but it's something that I think a lot of people don't truly seem to understand, which is what goes in your feed and what goes in your stories. And I wish I could tell you there was like hard and fast rules, but there's not. But I'm going to address some questions that I've been getting recently that I think that really kind of brought this to my attention that people weren't fully understanding it. Um, and like I said, like there's not like a lot of hard and fast rules, but there's just things that will um over time become really obvious to you that like this is not a feed post or this belongs in a story. Um, And there's some just like bad habits that I've been seeing that I also want to address to make sure that you guys are actually like using the platform effectively. And maybe some tips, tricks along the way as well in terms of getting more eyeballs on what you're putting in your stories. So first things first, this whole training started, or the idea for this training started because I had someone ask me my coffee thoughts. So if you follow me on Instagram, I do coffee thoughts pretty much every morning, and I have consistently for about 5, 6 years. So it's been a long time. And so someone said to me in my school community the other day, what type of content, like what content type does coffee thoughts fall under? And my response to that was none, because coffee thoughts are not a feed post. I would never run paid traffic to my coffee thoughts. The coffee thoughts are basically just a consistency mechanism that allows people like a behind the scenes look into what I'm thinking about and also what I'm doing on a daily basis. If you don't follow me on Instagram, this isn't going to make a tremendous amount of sense to you, but you can go and just find me on Instagram and there's a coffee thought that's posted from this morning. So what that does is it allows you to behind the scenes, like everyday things. So if we're going to take personal content, I'm going to break this into buckets. If we're going to take personal content and we're going to talk about like the different ways that you can talk about your personal stuff that will create connection with your ideal clients and your audience, then it can be broken down very simply into past, present, and lighthearted. So things that have happened to you in the past, stories from the past, things that are happening in the present, and anything that like the lighthearted stuff, a lot of the time is stuff that is just happening in real time, right? So the coffee thoughts is present. And the coffee thoughts, it doesn't even really, it's not really even a content type. It's just something that I do. So like, let's say that you wanted to have like a series of some sort. A lot of people copy my coffee thoughts, which, for me, it's like, I don't care if you copy me, but at the end of the day, like be more original. Like find kind of the thing that's your own thing. You're fine to use my coffee thoughts if you want. Lots and lots and lots of people have copied it, but no one has ever been as consistent as I have, right? People will start it and then, kind of come in and out of it. I can go back in my archive in my Instagram and I have missed maybe 3 days in 5.5 years. So I think that like the consistency creates that connection in terms of like, I am known or people look for my coffee thoughts. It's also a really great engagement mechanism because people are looking for it, they read them, and then they ask me questions about them. Um, and you can do this in a lot of different ways. It doesn't have to be thoughts. It can be just something that you do every single day that you document. I have a girlfriend who wanted to teach herself how to do a handstand. And every single day while she was practicing her handstand, she posted something on her Instagram stories, like showing her progress. And so her audience was able to follow her along and see her progress See, this is exactly, Katina, it is never on my posts because it is not a content type. So my coffee thoughts will always be in stories because also my coffee thoughts are only relevant for 24 hours. Okay. So for those of you who aren't like big Instagram users, your stories are only there for 24 hours. They expire after 24 hours. Your feed posts, your reels, your posts, your carousels, your all of those things, um, it all of those things, they live in your feed. The lazy people with Instagram stories, their only Instagram stories are that they post something to their feed and then share it in their story. That's not actually valuable in your story. And if you are going to do that, you should be doing that 24 hours after you posted the post. So you don't post the post and then immediately share it into your story because you're essentially wasting the secondary reach that you can get from people who only watch stories. So let the algorithm do its thing with your post, and then 24 hours later, you can give it a little bump by adding it to your story. But don't just share it to your story. Make people want to click on it. Put a great hook on it. Like do something that actually makes it a little bit more valuable. The other thing that I see people do in their Instagram stories is nothing face to camera and just like using their stories almost like billboards. Again, there is nothing in your feed or your stories that should look like a billboard. And that's just, it's not what social media is for. So if we're thinking about like what goes where, the most important thing that you can think about is timing, and timing being how long it lasts. So anything that's evergreen, anything that you want to live in your feed and for someone to a year from now be able to go and rewatch and it will still be relevant in a year, that goes in your feed. Anything else, anything that is passing or, a lot of the time the lighthearted stuff when it comes to sharing behind the scenes or your present type of personal content, that stuff can also go in your stories. But the way that I want you to think about your stories is almost like your behind the scenes, your mini vlog, your thing that just to give people a little bit of a glimpse into who you are and what you're doing today, what you're looking forward to, things like that. Now, can you put authority content or things like that in your stories? Yes, you can. Will people necessarily want to watch a whole long video about you talking about the market? Probably not. Not in your Instagram stories. Instagram stories are like lighthearted things that people can scan through and like have a little fun with, and you are constantly training your audience whether to skip you or stop and listen. So if you're posting junk in your stories, you are training your audience to when they see your name to swipe and scroll past. If you are doing stuff that like is actually interesting to them or um, that they want to see, then they will stop or they will click on your little circle to specifically watch your stories. There are a lot of people who only or who primarily watch stories and don't scroll. And there are also people who do the opposite. And a lot of that will come down to your demographic and like who you have as your audience. I mean, this is the other reason why just listed, just sold posts are ridiculous, to be honest. They don't provide any value. They are a billboard and they're not relevant in 2 weeks. Um, for your story, so it used to be the algorithm has changed quite a bit over the last like couple of months. It used to be that Instagram wanted you to post for maximum reach, 2 stories in the morning, 2 in the middle of the day, 2 closer to the end of the day. That is no longer the case. The truth is now the maximum reach that you can get is if you let your stories expire. So if you post everything, like let's say that you're posting at 10 a.m. and the ideal way that you do this is if you have two or three clips that you want to post, you post them all at 10 a.m. And then the next, you let them fully expire over that 24 hours before you post a story again. If I post something this morning and then at noon, I'll get a quarter of the views that I'll get if I let a story completely expire before I post again on stories. So that's the difference between me getting a couple thousand people watching my stories versus a couple hundred. It's a big difference in terms of visibility. So if you haven't tested that, try it out. Post one thing, one story, and let it run all the way through. You should never be posting a picture without text on it. So, Silvana, like pictures are fine for your Instagram story, but the whole point of it is that you actually want someone to have to stop and hold their thumb down in order to read the text or to stay on the story until the story runs out to watch the video. So either way is fine, but there has to be a point to it. There has to be something that someone is going to like actually get from it. Um, I see a lot of like, again, like really lazy stories. If you're going to use stories as part of your strategy, then use them. A lot of the time I teach, if you come to any of my events, you'll have seen this. I teach selling in stories. So I teach to sell your signature system in your stories, to educate in your stories and not necessarily as much in your feed. Because if someone comes in and binges your content in your feed, which is what you ideally want people to do, if you're selling in every post, people are going to get yucked off. But if they're watching your stories every day, I think I just coined a new thing. Megan caught it. I knew she would. Um, so uh but with the stories, um, you can sell and it disappears in 24 hours. So if you're hosting a class for buyers or sellers, where would you post that? I mean, I would probably, it depends on who it's for. I mean, if it was me, I would run paid traffic to it. Um, but I would put that in my stories. I would put that in my stories and I would keep hitting my stories with it. You can put it in your feed if you want to, but then you have to delete it. Like once it comes around, you got to get rid of it. The best way to promote a class is email, stories, paid traffic. But again, when we're talking about like if we're talking about the listings lab, we're talking about your 9 types of content. Like promoting a class doesn't fall into your 9 types of content, right? So your 9 types of content live in your feed. Anything outside of that, like even like for instance, Jody and I have been talking a lot about, trends and how to, because a lot of her content that we're building together is quite heavy. It's investment focused. It's got numbers in it. It's educational. Like we're like it's brain heavy. It's highly valuable, but it's brain heavy. And so we don't want all of her content to feel heavy. There has to be quote unquote comedic relief in her content. And so we're also playing with different types of more funny, more personality, like things that are like going to show her personality a little bit more in her, because I mean, she's not just a one-dimensional human being. She's a multi-dimensional character that we need to show all dimensions of those of her personality, of her knowledge, of all of these things in her content in order for people to feel like they can know, like, and trust her. Right? And so people online who take themselves too seriously will not perform as well. People who can show a little bit more behind the scenes, a little bit more vulnerability, a little bit more like Instagram versus reality kind of stuff. It's the reality that people actually want. It's what people connect to. If you've ever come to one of our events, you've heard me tell the story of Carolee pulling her best piece of content ever that she actually got direct clients from one piece of content was her pulling a chicken nugget out of her purse. Because there were so many moms who were like, "Oh my gosh, that's so relatable." And you're not trying to pretend to be this like, perfect box of a realtor because that's not actually what people are looking for anymore. So a lot of the way that you're thinking about it, I want you to stop thinking about Instagram or even social media as a whole as a vehicle to sell. Instagram is not to sell. Instagram is to generate relationships. And if you think about it that way, you will sell more property. You will get more business. You will generate more clients if you actually kind of stop selling. And I know that that's counterintuitive. But the way that you go after like a Zillow lead is not the same way that you connect with an audience on a social media platform. The people who are the most successful on social media platforms are the people who are not trying to extract from their audience. So if your stuff feels salesy, pull it back and really rework it. If you have ever put in anything, call me for all of your real estate needs, delete it and let's start again. Is it worth using Facebook stories? It's worth using Facebook stories if your audience watches Facebook stories. I mean, I think everybody watches Instagram stories, but I don't know if your audience watches Facebook stories. If for me, my visibility on Facebook stories is like a tiny, tiny fraction that it is on Instagram. Does it hurt? Absolutely not. It never hurts. The way that I like to think about this is, sometimes people will be like, oh, only like 100 people watch my stories. I'm like, okay, so if you had 100 people in a room and you got to get up in front of them for 2 minutes, is that better than not having gotten up in front of them on stage in front of 100 people for not for those 2 minutes? Of course not. You would take that all day long. So I want you to think about it the same way. It doesn't matter if you have a couple thousand people who watch your stories or if you have 100 people who watch your stories. Those are still human beings that are consuming your content. And so you have to give them a reason to want to continue to consume that content. Um, so value is not salesy. Value is only salesy if there's a tit for tat. If you're call to actioning everything, then you're not really giving value. You're giving value for an exchange. And I'm gonna change the way that we identify or that we value is changing. And what people are looking for as value online is also changing. So a really great example of this is leadership is value, belief shifting is value, 3 tips to stage your home is not value anymore. Education is changing and people want to be led and you want clients who want to be led. You don't want a client who's like, "Oh, but you told me that, that rugs should be green." And you were like, "No, I did not say that. I said that in this particular instance that the rug should be green. I did not say that all because people don't listen." So, what if instead you talked about like you actually taught people how to think about real estate, how to think about money, how to think about investments, how to make good decisions? That is actually a lot more valuable than any like tip and trick and hint that you could give. And a lot of the time it should be in the context of you or I. Most real estate content is very generalized. If you can add the words you or I in it instead, you are not thinking about things in the correct way. If I was going to buy an investment property right now, this is what I would be looking for. That is how you teach through the way that you think. People will choose you because of the way that you think, not because you've taught them how to do something. And that's the difference between leadership and um, kind of generic real estate content that we're seeing. Does that make sense? Yeah, cool. Um, if you're going to post on Facebook stories, could you? Yeah, 100%. If you're going to, you can post the same stories on Facebook and Instagram. You do not need to be recreating or doing anything different. Chances are the way that the algorithm works, the same people aren't going to see it anyway. So don't worry too much about like repetition right now. Worry about quality. So instead of like, again, like let's say that we're talking about, something that's going to go into a reel. A typical B-roll um, formula for a reel, if we're using like B-roll instead of a face-to-camera video, would be, B-roll with some sort of a statement, like a strong statement on top of it in text, and a trending audio or a voiceover. That's your like typical formula for like B-roll for a B-roll reel. You can use the same formula, not with the trending audio, but like you can use the same actually with the trending audio. You can use the same formula in a lot of different ways. So here, I'm going to give you an example. Let me pull this up. If you're in the listings lab, you're about to get this. I just built this. Poor Cynthia. Poor Cynthia. I'm like, hey, I built this thing. Can you put it in the program? And she's like, oh my God, okay. Um, but like, I just built all of these. So these are text overlay formulas. So if you're going to do B-roll as an example, how would we like there? I think there's like 10 pages of this, but like imagine waking up to this view every morning. Imagine your kids growing up on this quiet street. Imagine selling your home without stress. Like imagine all of this stuff, but like then the caption has to have the value in it, right? This is literally just get people to stop. Um, what X buys you in this neighborhood versus this neighborhood? What locals love about living in this area. Actually, Stephanie Sauve did something really funny this morning. She had ChatGPT roast her area and she put that in her Instagram stories, and it was really funny. She lives in Woodbridge, and if you are in the Toronto area, like it was really funny. She put into ChatGPT and asked ChatGPT to roast Woodbridge, and it was hysterical. It was like, you know, um every driveway looks like a luxury car dealership. And like it was super funny. And if you know anything about Woodbridge, it was so accurate. So you could do the same thing for yours, and that's like a funny thing you could do a reel about that can live in your feed and can show a little bit of personality and a little bit of sense of humor, right? So yeah, all of this stuff is really just to say that if it's something that can live for longer than 24 hours or is relevant for longer than 24 hours, put it in your put it in your feed. Like as an example, if you want to show some personality, um, like for me, for instance, I have a really, really good friend who has an entire series in her stories about cheese and crackers, about her love of cheese and crackers. That is not something that is going to live in her feed. Okay. That's not something that is going to be valuable, that is going to live in her feed. But every single day, she makes a snack of cheese and crackers. And it's literally her dancing, eating cheese and crackers. And now it's making connections in people's brains. I cannot eat cheese and crackers without thinking about her. She gets hundreds of DMs every day from people saying, I'm eating cheese and crackers. It's super random, but it works. So, Jim, figure out what it is that you can get away with, right? Like, what's your thing? Like, own your weird a little bit. And you also never know what people are going to latch onto, right? Like, I'm considering doing like a whole thing about how I have like 900 pairs of glasses. Like, I have so many pairs of glasses, but I also think I have a different personality for every single pair of glasses that I wear, right? Megan Arbuckle is like, I need to buy a pair of glasses. Who does she text? This one, because I chose the glasses that are on her face right now. And so like, what are the things that like you can make your thing? Stuart, dope ass glasses. Like Stuart has the best glasses on right now. Why are we not talking about Stuart's glasses more? Right? Like, what are some of the things that you do that are like quirky? Because there's always a quirkiness when we're talking about lighthearted personal content, right? But where you can let people a little bit in behind the scenes. And I know every single person is saying, I'm not that interesting, or I don't have anything that's fun, or like, blah, blah, blah. But her thing was literally cheese and crackers, right? Jody makes these elaborate lunches for her children every day. And I literally message her like once a week. And I'm like, can you please make me lunch? Like, I'm probably going to eat a scoop of peanut butter, right? But like, she makes these incredible lunches and like people message her about lunches. And then she also shows the like Instagram versus reality. Here are the beautiful lunches that I make my children. And here's what comes back. I spent all this time doing this thing and they didn't even eat it, right? Because that's also super relatable for her niche. She's working with upsizing families in like in the west suburbs of Toronto. So like that is like very, very relatable for people. What are the things for your niche that your niche will resonate with or will just make connections? I'm doing this whole no buy thing in 2025. I think everybody knows that at this point. And the number of messages that I get about people who are like, oh my God, I'm finishing a lipstick. I've never finished a lipstick in my life. You have inspired me to like use my shit. I'm like, great. We're all doing it together. It has nothing to do with business. And it is literally just something that like I'm doing in my personal life, but it makes people feel more connected to me. And there's people who are also now doing it because I'm doing it. Right? I know I'm not wearing makeup right now, but it still freaks me out to see you in makeup. My mother-in-law sent me the same text message. She responds to my stories every time I'm wearing makeup, and she's like, "You look so weird in makeup." Like, right? But it's just one of those things that like I finished a candle. Who am I? Okay? Like I'm like the most proud of myself about everything, right? So these are things that are, probably good, like good for me, good for my brain, but like a lot of that is just living in my stories. Could I make a proper post about it? Yes. Could I make a reel that like talks about more in depth what I'm doing, why I'm doing it, the impact that I'm trying to have on the little island that I live on? Yes. Could I tie it to a lesson in terms of how I get dopamine from finishing things the same way that I would get dopamine from buying something? Yes. But the little update of like, oh my God, I finished a lip balm or I finished a perfume, that goes in my stories. It's nuanced. Like I said, like I can't give you hard and fast rules. But I know Tom, I don't think he's here right now, but I know Tom is going to ask me for this replay. Tom, I want you to stop doing the stories that you're doing. He's just posting rates in his story every day. If you want to do that, you can make that your thing, but you have to do it face to camera. The way that it's currently being done is disconnecting. If you want the replay of something, you have to email me. I am here all on my lonesome. I cannot look at every single person who asks me for something in this. You have to email me. Um, you could do, if you're a reader, you could talk about the books that you're reading. You could do like literally a book club of one. You could make fun of yourself that you are a book club of one and talk about like what books you're reading next in your Instagram stories, right? there's just so many things that you could do that like are just like part of your everyday that you're going to do anyway, but you're just giving someone a glimpse, right? If you are a beverage goblin and you always have 5 drinks next to you while you're working, which I think is most, I mean, at least most women, right? Like you've got a caffeinated one, you have a hydrating one, and then you also have a fun one, right? Like that's always what you have. Like so many people have that. And it's also so relatable. But you could do like a drink review of the day. Like, here are the things that I'm drinking today. And you could make it a thing. Like, there are so many options of, let's say that you're like, hey, I'm a guy and I'm trying to figure out what mustache looks best on me, right? I don't know. And then you every day are like, okay, let's try this one, vote on it. Right? You're going to get hilarious conversations that ensue from something like that. I just looked at Roger and was like, mustache. Right? You can do so many funny, relatable like things to bring people in and also humanize you. People don't see people in real estate as real human beings. We're like sharks trying to get their money. And so, how do we do this in a way that is actually like fun and relatable and that people want to interact with us? The key is get people DMing you, get people responding to your stories, get people like commenting on things. That I would say, like, when I post stuff, people don't comment on my posts, people DM me. I get probably between Facebook and Instagram, I get like 1,000 DMs a day. And some of it is like obviously my Facebook group, which I get a ton of DMs for, but like also like just people being like, I really needed to hear that coffee thought today. Or do you know how many people want to send me pictures of their snowy landscape because I'm not in the snow? I'm like, by all means, send me all of your like crappy snowy photos and it'll just make me happier that I'm not there. Right. If you have a question, Tara, do you mind just typing it? I can't unmute you. I put something in the settings right at the beginning of the call, so I can't unmute you. um, Better to make a story than a post. It depends. It depends on what it is. It fully depends on like make your posts really good and everything else can go in your stories. Right? Like if you have something in passing, like you take a picture that is like really beautiful and you're like having a thought like, my view is nicer than your view, put that in your stories. But if you're going to like talk about the journey of like if I was going to like talk about the journey or like something about like moving to Toronto to the Bahamas, that's a post. But if I'm just showing someone like what I'm looking at right now, that's a story. Um, Highlights are actually not really as much of a thing anymore. Um, we're actually probably going to stop teaching highlights. The thing that actually matters more are your 3 pinned posts at the top of your feed. I don't even have anything pinned right now because I'm in the process of creating those posts. But yeah. Brian, yeah. So family pictures, kids, all of that stuff, like in the day to day in your stories. Um, if you have old highlights, you get rid of them. You can if you want. I'm actually considering getting rid of mine because like I don't really think anybody really like looks at them. Okay, so stories. Keep them lighthearted, mini vlog, behind the scenes. I'm having trouble with the stories for selling. Yeah, so that's like a whole big training. I actually spend like 2 hours on that during live events. That is not something that I can just answer like simply. Send me an email, Tara, and we'll have a conversation about that a little bit more if you don't mind, just because like I have like 3 more minutes and I can't possibly give you proper value in 3 minutes. Um, yeah, memes are just for DMs to your best friends. Memes are not for posting. Memes are not even really for stories unless they're very, very infrequent. Um, so high level, what should be in the pin posts? Something about you, like a get to know you, brand story, that kind of idea. Something about someone, something like more like fun and personal, and then something about like you could do like a like more of like a selling post where it's like you talk about your signature system and like who you are and why you work with the people that you work with, and something a little bit more like that without a call to action. Um, I don't know yet, Nicole. She's asking where can we find the list that I showed you. I don't know yet. I don't know where Cynthia's going to put it. Cynthia's the boss of the things in the listings lab. I create them, I give them to Cynthia. She makes them beautiful, and then she puts them where they make sense. She'll make an announcement in school when it's live. That will show up in like an announcement in the school community when she's got it posted. I just gave it to her yesterday, but she doesn't have to do very much with it, so it should be there later today. Um, can you please explain the strategy of how to use IG and Facebook to promote an open house or listing, or should you? We don't teach that. Um, we don't teach that, especially not organically. You could run paid traffic to it, um, like some like a very very short like a short kind of funnel to promote it. Um, but I wouldn't do it in if you absolutely have to, the only place that it should go in a story is in a story, and try to figure out a way to make it more interesting. Because if you just post something that says like open house at 123 ABC Street from 2 to 4 p.m. today, ugh, and people are probably just going to like swipe through it, and it's actually going to hurt you in the algorithm because nobody's watching it and nobody's consuming that content. So if you were going to do something like that, yucked out, Renata. Um, so if you were going to do something like that, I mean, that's it. To be perfectly honest, if you want me to be like super, super direct, which I think is like kind of my mantra this year, um, it's not valuable and it doesn't really belong on social media. And the way that 99.99% of real estate agents use social media is wrong. And that's so the way that I've always said this, I usually say it a lot nicer than this, but if you want to have the results that everyone else has, do what everyone else does. Which is if you 74% of agents in the United States did zero deals in 2024. If you would like to be in like the big pile of mediocrity, do what everyone else does. And if you want to have a business that does stuff differently and innovates and uses these social platforms properly, then ignore everything that every other agent is doing. I think that like if you get one lesson from me, I want it to be that. Like the industry and the way that people advertise online is ridiculous and makes us all look bad and makes us look like we don't know what we're doing. So I think that there's a lot of growth to be had, and there's a lot of business to be generated from these platforms, but you have to almost forget everything that you've been doing up until this point and stop following. This is why I say to all the time, stop following other agents. Like you're just going to do what they do because that's what everybody does. And then you're going to like essentially devalue your brand because um, you're just following what everyone else is doing. So if you want what they have, do what they do. And if you want something different or something better, do something better. And I think that's just kind of like the moral of life. If you want what everyone else has, do what everyone else does. And if you want something different or something better, then you have to do something different and something better than all of those other people are doing. And I think that sometimes there's a lot of like self-reflection that happens through the lens of marketing. People will come into the listings lab and be like, I am a different person now. And I'm like, yeah, because you weren't able to create the results that you wanted as the person that you were before. Um, anyway, I hope this was helpful. Send me emails. If you can, and I don't say this lightly, since I'm being a bit of an ass today, I'm just gonna like put it out there. Um, if you can get your butt to Orlando, you will make money. You will make money from being in that room. I'm doing Orlando and I'm doing Calgary. And those are the only two events that I have left in 2025. So if you can get yourself to one of those events, and the sooner the better, which is Orlando is in, I think, 18 days, do what you can to be in that room. It is a small, small group. I think we have like maybe 25 people that are going to be in that room. And I have enough team that everyone is going to have one-on-one time. So if you want to make really, really big moves in your business and especially in your marketing and your video and stuff in the next quarter, don't wait until the end of the year to come back to me and say, hey, I didn't do anything this year, or my marketing's not working. Figure it out. We have single moms that figure it out that come. We have people who, like, people get really resourceful to be in the room. I'm flying to Cabo on the 12th to speak at an event for a friend just because he showed up at my event and gave me some value. Is it convenient for me? Absolutely not. But I'm speaking at his event and I know that I will leave his event with value. So if you can get yourself in the room, if you're Canadian and like your morals will not allow you to be in Orlando in March, I get it. Come to Calgary. Um, I feel you, I understand you, and I get it. Come to Calgary. But if you are willing to go to Orlando, do not um like get it locked in. Calgary will is going to be sold out by the time Orlando comes around. Calgary's almost sold out now, in for September. But if you can get in that room, get in the room. You will make more money because you were in that room. And 3 days is nothing. Um, online option for Orlando. Yeah, here. I'm just going to, there we go. That's the Holly. I just put the link for the event. Mel, you should be in Orlando. 100%. Send me an email. Send me an email. Because we're going to do a lot of like workshopping in Orlando as well. And I'm rebuilding a lot of content and like all like that whole list that I showed you, I built because I wanted it built for Orlando. So if you need anything or you have questions, send me an email. Sorry, I froze for a second. Send me an email if you need anything. And yeah. And if you have questions too, like about stories, if you still have questions about what we talked about today, send me an email. I'm here. Okay, cool. Yeah, happy? Okay, thanks, guys. See you soon.